What's up? What's up? This is F. Molina, and I got Chris Rodriguez with me today. And Chris, we have a special guest today.
We sure do, man.
We have the Democratic Party Chair, Patrick
Eronini.
Eronini.
Por favor.
Yeah.
Now, what type of Hispanic last name is that, Patrick?
It's not, it's Italian.
So how does a guy with an Italian last name end up down here in South Texas?
Well, it gets more complicated than that. Not only do I have an Italian last name, I have a Nigerian background. I grew up Russian, and of course speak Russian as a first language. And I live in South Texas, in Edinburgh, Texas.
So Russian is your first language?
Actually, I speak it better than I speak English, yes.
Wow.
Wow.
I
can barely speak English. What about you, Chris?
I failed English in high school.
So how did you find your way to South Texas? What brought you down here?
Well, I've lived all over the country. I've lived all over the world. So at a point, I do have a background in business and economics, and I have of course, I'm a nurse practitioner. So at some point, the economy was going to correct itself. So I had a lot of investments. So I did a lot of research, and the research showed me that the best way to get value for my assets was to disinvest from Maryland and move down somewhere else where I could acquire the same assets and have some money left over. So that's how I ended up here in South Texas many, many years ago.
Or the Miami of Texas, right, Patrick?
Correct.
And how did you become the Democratic Party chair? How did that happen?
I have done politics in most of my life growing up, whether it's student politics, whether it's party politics, and of course I've done a lot of charity work as well along the route. So I've been the precinct chair for the Democratic Party for many years. I feel very comfortable being behind the scene. So prior to becoming the Democratic Party chair, I was and still remain a member of the State Executive Committee of the Texas Democratic Party. I'm actually the chair of the Convention Committee, which is the committee that selects where the Texas Democrats hold their biannual conventions. So I've sat over, on the Rules Committee that draws the rules for the Texas Democratic Party for many years. So, of course, that's along with being a precinct chair. So there was a vacancy. Vacancy created by the county chair running for county judge position, so it needed to be filled. So I was nominated and elected unanimously by other precinct chairs to fill that position.
And if you don't mind me asking, were you the first African American elected precinct chair?
Probably the first African American elected south of San Antonio.
So, African American here in South Texas, you are like the minority, right?
I'm the minority of the minority. Not only do I'm African American, of course, you can hear I have an accent, plus I'm bald as well. But I've got to tell you also that for about 5 years I was a board member of the Boys and Girls Club of Edinburgh. Of course, we did great things. I was on that board that moved the Boys and Girls from Etule to where it is today.
That's awesome.
That's like a $60 million project. So I've been around for a while, a lot longer than people realize. But again, I'm very comfortable being behind the scene. I'm not, I'm not crazy for the limelight. I believe in the team. I believe in what we can accomplish. I believe in giving back. Hopefully one day when I die, I can look back and say, well, I did it all.
What drives you? I mean, why sit on all of these boards and why be a public servant? Because let's face it, public servants, they really, the only thing you really get is a lot of criticism and very
and enemies. And I've paid a lot of price for it. We fought the proposition one tax, not once but twice. We defeated the Edinburgh School District bond. All those taxes. You just imagine if Prop 1 had passed. People are complaining today about higher property taxes. Can you imagine if Prop 1 passed? How much higher the taxes would be? Can you imagine if the Edinburgh School District bond passed? We also defeated the bond in McAllen. And it's not that I'm anti-education, but it's because I believe in the best value for your money. And I don't think anybody can spend your money better than you do. I don't think you should have to work just to pay a house. It has to be about quality of life. I'm a strong believer that if the government, any government for that matter, wants to grow, it needs to grow based on expansion. You got to expand the economy, not tax people to death. Every family should be able to afford a vacation. Every family should be able to afford a good time, go to the restaurant, and not have to worry about being able to pay tax every year. If the Edinburgh School District bond, for example, had passed, that was almost $400 million. Now, with the reduced capacity, we would have had a lot of real estate, not enough kids, and we would still have to pay. So I'm a low tax person. Right now, more than ever, we need to make sure that we roll back these taxes. We need to hold elected officials accountable. Okay, I've never, and I wish they will give the taxpayers back some of the money when they have excess tax collection. Okay, I mean, there's so much wrong, and that's why I fight every day. There's so much wrong with society that we have to. The Bible says, if the righteous don't speak up, bad things happen. So I have to speak up as long as I'm able and willing. I'm able to speak up. It's very so wrong that you have, for example, on the appraisal board, people who have vested interest in your property taxes staying high. Nobody who buys up distressed property should be on the appraisal board. Okay.
And when you say distressed properties, those are properties that fall like into foreclosure and then get purchased, right?
Exactly. Where the property owners are unable to pay. Where people inherit homes and they lose homes not because they can't maintain them, but because they can't pay the property taxes. That's a shame. Yeah. People lose homes because they improve on the property, the quality of the housing, and all of a sudden they trigger a higher tax level.
And the county seems like it's playing this, like semantics kind of, because they say we have kept to the same property tax rate for the past 20 or 30 years. However, the property values in which they're estimating have skyrocketed, right?
In the face of increasing appraisal valuation, keeping the property rates the same is a de facto tax increase. They're not being honest about it, And I tell you, part of the problem is, why would you have people who do businesses with the county make donations to elected officials? It breeds corruption. It breeds the kind of problems that we have. You have people who are supposed to supervise contractors, and yet those same contractors give them donations. It doesn't get more blatant than that. So who are they working for, the contractors or the taxpayers? So that's why you have all the drainage issues, because they cannot, having taken these donations, hold those contractors accountable. So we must fight to make sure that nobody who does business with the county should be able to give any elected official that oversees them any donations of any sort.
Chris, I want to apologize for having you on this podcast. And once it goes public, your appraisal values are definitely going up. Thank you, Patrick. But no, Patrick, you're shooting it real, man. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Like I can't tell you, the pressures one faces. I've had people slander me in the media, who don't even know me. Make allegations. I just had a lawsuit against a physician out of McAllen who went to the media, made a lot of negative comments, and the judge last Friday found that not only did I have a valid contract with Dr. Rashid in Mission, but also there was basis for slander and defamation, and so it was nice to feel to be vindicated, But those are the prices that you pay when you speak up. People don't expect you to speak up, but I speak up, I stand up to be counted, and I have no regrets. What can I tell you?
And Chris, you want to chime in here with one of your good questions?
I mean, I'm just listening. Thank you for advocating for a lot of people. Apparently, it's important that
I advocate even for the dead. Okay, and I'll tell you this story. I had a patient of mine, and by the way, I'm a nurse practitioner. So I had a patient of mine who died. So of course, over the years, I formed a relationship with her. So I go to the funeral at the cemetery at the corner of Shunio and the Expressway, and I look to the east side of the cemetery. Okay, and it all looked abandoned, all full of weed. There were trees growing on the burial sites. That led to a whole project where we've got the county and other different parties to clean up the cemetery at the corner of Shunio and the expressway. So not only do I fight for the living, but I also speak for the dead.
That's
okay?
awesome.
Now that cemetery, was it the African American cemetery where it's known that back in the day, it's kind of sick to even say it, but back in the day, they wanted to bury African American people in their own cemetery, like plots. They didn't want to bury them with everybody else.
For those who don't know a lot of the history of the cemetery at the corner of Shunio and the expressway in Edinburgh, which is, by the way, a historical marker, there are actually 4 cemeteries there, 4 distinct cemeteries there. You have the Roselawn, which is on the northwest side of that property. On the northeast is a cemetery that belongs to the county, and on the southeast it's a cemetery that was the original cemetery. They're mainly German, French, buried there. So that property, so they deeded the creators of that cemetery deeded Roselawn, no, not Roselawn. What's the name of that property? Roselawn.
Roselawn.
They deeded Roselawn to Roselawn on the condition that Roselawn would take care of the old, the cemetery. So by the time we got involved, Roselawn had moved on. There was no money. They had spent all the money, and it was all full of neglect. There was no grass, there was no sprinkler, there was nothing. It was all round down. I had 4 meetings with Ramon Garcia, who was then the county judge, along with Joseph Palacios, who was commissioner, and Valdeguerra, who's the business manager for the county. I had 4 meetings to convince them that they owned the northeast side of the county, of the cemetery that belongs to the county. The result is, if you go down there today, it's all cleaned up. We had to fight with the family that ran the cemetery. I got asked many times, why do you worry? Why do you care? Who do you have a family member buried here? I said, no, I don't. The kind of society we are depends on how we treat those who cannot speak for themselves, the dead, the weak, the poor, So as long as I have health, and I'm going to keep speaking up,
And you also did some stuff for the Edinburgh airport, right?
Yes. I was on the board briefly.
And for people that don't know, Edinburgh does have an airport, right?
Yes, Edinburgh has an airport. For those who don't know, it's by the racetrack. Okay, it's on 490 and 281. So I became the president of the board of the Boys and Girls of the South Texas International Airport, which is the Edinburgh's airport. So part of the problem was, when we went there were a lot of people who owned aircrafts. They parked the aircraft at the airport, but they wouldn't pay. So there were a lot of delinquent fees. Plus, nobody knew where it was. And then the racetrack that was next door, they had to actually give it a notice to quit. The racetrack brings a lot of publicity. It was great for the city of Edinburgh. So when I took over as the president of the city airport, we embarked on the program of, first of all, cleaning up the books, making sure that the racetrack was welcome. We extended the contract for the racetrack because that racetrack sits on the property of the airport. And then we got a lot of big grants from the state. We got, I think, almost $10 million of grants for that period to expand the project. By the time I left the airport, we had plans working with the state to move the state troopers, the National Guard, to relocate them permanently there. Had we gone through with that, had the city moved forward with our plans, not only would they have had the master plan that we made, which was the first time they had a master plan updated in over a decade, but we would have had the National Guard there forcing the state to build longer runways to bring in the aircraft. But also we're in negotiation with the Colombians. We're going to move the operation of the Colombian bouquet flower growers from Miami to Edinburgh. And then that was going to trigger the construction of, some cold warehouses. Okay, so, but it's unfortunate that, politics kind of seems to take the best of everything in the city of Edinburgh. And unfortunately, we left the board, and the airport is still back where it was.
I know you want to ask him, Chris.
What?
You're just embarrassed.
No.
You know what, Pat? I'll ask you.
It's okay.
I'll ask you for him. Chris wants to know what's going on with the Democratic Party and the Republicans who seem to be like winning like some races. Not all the races, but
No, they're not winning. The Republicans are not winning. First of all, let's understand one thing very clearly. There is no Republican Party today. You have the Trumpsters. You have the party of Trump. You know, there is nothing wrong with being a Republican because if being a Republican means that you have a set of beliefs. I might disagree with them, but the so-called Republicans today are Trumpsters. They believe in a person with all his weaknesses, with all his faults, with all his horrible qualities. They believe in one person. Now, when it comes to the last election, I'll tell you what happened last election. You had elected Democrats. The county judge, Richard Cortez, is an elected Democrat, supposedly. He was openly campaigning for Republicans. Of course, he had some votes. Of course, they're going to do better because, when that happens. And then you had a candidate called Joe Biden. On national television, he had a lot of negative stuff to say about the oil and gas industry. Okay, in South Texas, every household has somebody who dropped out of college or high school who makes a lot of money working in the oil and gas industry. So that didn't help either. So you had on one hand motivated Trumpsters coming out to vote who have always been here, and then you have the Democrats who were very dismayed, some of them frankly felt insulted by the comments of the candidate Biden, and that's what happened. Well, we didn't lose any seats. The Republicans who have always been here, the Trumpsters who have always been here but hidden, just got more vocal and more visible. So you have to understand one thing: the Democratic Party shares more of our values as a community. We are a family-oriented party, okay? And I tell you, we don't double talk like the Republicans. And I'll tell you some of the inconsistencies and why I will always remain a Democrat, okay? You can't tell me that you love the unborn child, but you are for the death penalty. It's inconsistent. You can't tell me, even if I get raped, I must have that child. You can't tell me you're for personal space, personal autonomy, personal freedom, but you want to tell a woman what to do with her child, her uterus, and her body? That's inconsistent. You can't tell me you love a child who's unborn, but you don't care whether the kids going to school have masks to protect them, get vaccinated. If you have a right not to get vaccinated, if you have a right not to wear a mask, you have a right to die. You certainly have a right to your body, or should have a right to your body. And that's the inconsistency. So if the governor, for example, would just spend a little bit of the time and attention he wastes on all of these petty issues, taking away autonomy from local, cities and school boards, okay? And spend it just a little bit on the national grid, on the state grid, power grid. It might help us, okay? So you have the inconsistencies. And frankly, let's face it, the Republicans want to have a pure white political party. They are scared of the changing demography of the nation. And that's what you see playing out. So it's very misguided for any valid person to really think that they are, that they can be genuinely Republican, or in this case, Trumpster, Most of those people, I bet you, have never moved to Louisiana or gone up to North Dakota. I'd love for them to move up north and come back and tell me they still want to be Republicans. So the Republican Party today that we have is not. There's only one political party today in the USA, which is the Democratic Party.
Well, I mean, the main problem that I have with the Democratic Party, Patrick, is I don't see enough Democratic trains. Like, I'm driving around looking for the Democratic train, and I'm like, there's a Trump train. There's a Trump train. But
true.
But no.
It's called complacency, okay? Because we have been in power. And frankly, I do have a lot of issues with the Democratic Party itself. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. I mean, the issue on the border is complete chaos. There is no excuse, You cannot have an open border. It's recipe for disaster. And I tell anybody who wants an open border is when you go home, leave your front door open. Okay, nobody has that. That's complete chaos. We have to have orderly immigration. But there goes again the inconsistency of the Republicans. They criticize Democrats for allowing genuine refugees to migrate, right? But they don't want to reform the immigration system. So they're playing political football with it. We have a problem as a nation with immigration, okay? We have to be able to, as a nation, we will die without fresh immigrants. That's just a reality. We need cheap labor. That's the reality, okay? So we need to have a way, an orderly, legalized way for migrants to come here, especially if they're fleeing from political persecution. But we cannot leave our nation open for everybody who has an economic problem. We have enough of ourselves, of those ourselves. So as a party, we have our issues, but we're more honest about them. We're more humane about those issues. So if the Republicans truly cared about, controlling immigration, they need to join us, reform the system. If they really cared about the unborn child, if they really care about the separation of families, as they claim, what they do is work with us, reform the judicial system that puts more families unnecessarily in jail, and so on and so forth. So the Republicans are just double talk, or rather the Trumpsters, what can I tell you? So, but the Democrats need to wake up, because increasingly, as the younger generation in South Texas feel alienated, okay, they become misguided and begin to think that being Republican or being a Trumpster is a solution.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult, complicated situation. But all you have to do is ask the average Republican today, what do you believe in? They have no set of beliefs. All they do is believe in one man. And last time I checked, he wasn't Jesus Christ.
True.
It's a very scary thing.
Yeah. It is a scary. You raised some really good points,
Yeah.
Patrick. Like it's a one-person party.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you say anything against Trump, there you go. You become a target. Doesn't matter who you are.
I mean, you could piss off any Republican real quick.
I mean, and all they want to do is dwell on negativity. It's almost like they want to find a reason to divide the nation. A reason to. I mean, when people talked about defund the police, it was horrible. Nobody ever means to defund the police. It'd be crazy.
Yeah.
But you see, they chose the wrong slogan.
Yeah.
Okay, all it meant was, can we get more resources to make sure the police is better trained, to make sure that violence use of force becomes the last resort. That's all it meant. Okay, and then when you heard people talk about Black Lives Matter, nobody ever said other lives didn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is that you got to focus on the problem that's most apparent, the most acute problem that we have. We just have an unnecessarily high number of black males being killed for no valid just cause. So you can't have a police officer being the judge, the jury, and the executioner. That's a recipe for chaos. Police officers should be, there to protect everybody.
Yeah.
But you see the Republicans, trying to fan, the fire of this, discord, trying to pitch one group against the other. And of course, you get the Democratic Party taking the minorities for granted. It's another thing altogether, So it's very complicated, as they say. But in South Texas, our values as a community kind of goes hand in hand with the Democratic value. We have pro-family. We not only love the unborn child, but we know that because there's a high probability that somebody could go on death row and still be innocent, okay? That has been proven. We're also against the death penalty. We also believe that when you have a child, we're going to help you with affordable housing, affordable health care. We're going to make college accessible for that child once that child is born, okay? All the Republicans want to do is bring you to this world, okay? And they're not going to help you with affordable housing. They're not going to expand Medicaid to allow you to get health care. They're not going to make college affordable. So who is the family of human beings? Who cares more about human lives?
Yeah.
The Democrats or the Republicans? It's wanting to double talk, which is what the Republicans do. Okay? You know how many people died when the power grid went down? Texas is the only state that's not connected to the national grid.
Yeah.
Okay? We come last when it comes to health care. We come last when it comes to graduation.
Don't talk about education. Don't talk about education.
Well, you have to understand that the whole is very deliberate. Okay, education is the leveler. So if they can keep minorities uneducated, okay, if they can keep minorities uneducated, they will stay in control. The biggest fear that the Republican white male-dominated party has is the fear of domination by the ever-expanding minority. So everybody has to understand what the problem is. So they might talk in coded language, but the reality is the fear, the backlash. They're losing power increasingly. Why would you have Texas, for example? The population grew mainly due to ethnic minorities. So now they gerrymander the new districts. There will be no new congressperson of ethnic minority come next Congress.
Wow.
That's not the intent of the law.
Wow.
So do they really care? If they cared about the minorities, if they cared about the black and the Hispanics, people of color, they would allow those who have contributed to the expansion of the population to benefit from the redistricting and make it a fairer process. This nation, this state must look like those who occupy the lands.
And so what does the future hold for Patrick?
Oh, I go where the calling is. I have been very fortunate. I've been very fortunate. I live a very good life. I've lived a very good life. I have kids who are grown. So as long as there's a need, I'm willing to serve. I just came from San Antonio to look at the facilities of the city of San Antonio. I'm working on the 2024 Texas Convention to decide where it's going to be held. So now we're down to the cities of San Antonio and El Paso. So I just came from San Antonio today. I'm going to go to El Paso on March the 2nd to look at the facilities, and then on March the 26th, the executive board of the Democratic Party, will look at my recommendations and pick a city to host the 2024 convention. So it's very exciting. There's always a lot of things to do. I practice medicine. I see a lot of patients every day. I do a lot of free medical service. As long as I have the ability to, that's what I intend to keep doing. When it comes to politics, that's a different matter altogether.
I own a comic book store, right? So you can tell a lot about a person by the superhero they like. Who's your favorite superhero?
I don't know. The main superhero I know growing up is Spider-Man. So he's trying to save the world, I guess. Pretty much. Yeah, Spider-Man is a good one.
Spider-Man is a great one.
Well, and I've been very lucky, like I said. I grew up about 30 miles from a nuclear station called Chernobyl. I don't know if you've heard of Chernobyl.
Yeah.
So I lived actually there when Chernobyl exploded. So having survived that, you realize how lucky. A lot of people that I know died post-Chernobyl.
Patrick, hold on, man. Hold on. You just... Did you just say that you lived?
Yeah, I lived in a place called Kiev. Kiev is the capital of the Ukraine. So I lived there when the Chernobyl nuclear station exploded. I can tell you, everybody who responded, the firefighters that responded, we were lucky because the wind was blowing in a different direction. That's really how we got lucky.
Wow. Yeah.
So you have a lot of, I've had a lot of, chances in life. And again, like I said, when you grow up, all your kids are grown, you've really done most of what you plan to do, so I feel very lucky, very fortunate.
How old were you when the Chernobyl blast happened?
That was like about my 20s, I think.
Wow, that must have been crazy.
Yeah, but you were young, naive, and and
when you're that young, you're like, let's go see the radioactive site.
Well, actually, the communists lied. That was it used to be called the Soviet Union. So it was during the communist period. So they lied about the whole explosion. They minimized the impact of it. Of course, international media didn't have access. They didn't have access to international media. So you kind of listen to the local news and you believe them. Until again, gradually it became apparent that it was a huge, huge problem. A lot of people died, not just from immediate impact, but for many years, people had thyroid cancer and other, nuclear-related illnesses. So having survived that and many more, ended up in South Texas, But I want to remind everybody that Edinburgh used to have a huge black population, okay? Edinburgh hasn't always been majority Hispanic, okay? It used to have a huge black population. And if you go back to the history of South Texas, when the U.S. took over South Texas from Mexico, there was a huge, viable, thriving black population. And they had two options, either become new slaves again or move to Mexico. A bunch of them chose to move into Mexico, So if you go to the cemetery again at the corner of Shuni and the Expressway, wonderful stories you can tell from there.
Wow.
And of course, the remaining population, black population, as they got older, their kids took off to Houston, Dallas, elsewhere. They didn't come back. But of course, they left their dead here. So if you go to the cemetery, you can tell, again, there is a very wonderful organization called Viva, Valley in the Valley, mainly of African American descent, and so they take care of the cemetery, the Roselawn Cemetery, which is predominantly black. They give scholarship to black children in the valley, and they encourage and help black-owned businesses thrive in the valley. They do a lot of wonderful things. So I encourage everybody, help Viva, support Viva. Of course, join Viva. You don't have to be black to join Viva, by the way.
Oh, cool. And our last question for you, like Patrick, because you're a busy man and you got some political events to get to. If you had to choose between watching Star Trek and Star Wars, which one would you pick?
Star Wars.
Good. With that, we invite you back onto the show one day to talk about any other topic you want to talk about.
My pleasure.